At exactly 017 hours on April 2nd, 2026, the skies above central Israel shattered. Iran had just launched its most coordinated ballistic missile volley since the war began on February 28th. A cascading wave of Shahab-3 and Khaybar-Shakhan medium-range ballistic missiles, their re-entry vehicles slicing through the upper atmosphere at over Mach 12, each one locked onto population centers and military installations across the Israeli heartland. 14 people were wounded near Tel Aviv, including an 11-year-old girl, as Iron Dome batteries fired intercept after intercept in overlapping arcs of white smoke. This was not a random strike. This was Iran's direct answer to a single word Donald Trump had just broadcast to the entire world: Stone Age. This was day 34 of Operation Epic Fury, and the next 48 hours would push the entire Middle East to the absolute edge of total regional war. To understand what happened in those 48 hours, you need to go back 24 hours earlier. On April 1st, US and Israeli strike packages had already begun hammering Iran's industrial backbone with surgical precision. Steel plants in Isfahan and Farrokhzhar were reduced to twisted wreckage. Pharmaceutical manufacturing facilities, civilian infrastructure by any legal definition, were struck. Port infrastructure along the Persian Gulf coastline was targeted. A desalination plant on Qushem Island, sitting directly inside the Strait of Hormuz choke point, was knocked completely offline. Iran's Hormuzgan provincial officials confirmed the strike. No military value, pure pressure, pure signal. Simultaneously, Iranian IRGC drone operators were executing their own multi-theater retaliation across the Gulf Cooperation Council. In Kuwait, Iranian drones struck fuel depots at Kuwait International Airport, igniting fires that burned for hours. The Mina Al-Hamadi oil refinery, the country's critical petroleum processing backbone, was hit for the third time in 2 weeks. Emergency services scrambled. The Kuwaiti government diverted highway traffic near Sar as sirens screamed and falling debris from intercepted projectiles rained down on residential areas. In Bahrain, warning sirens activated across the entire country. The Interior Ministry ordered motorists off key highway corridors as fragmented intercept debris struck foreign flag vessels in the Salman industrial zone, killing one worker and critically wounding 2 others. In Saudi Arabia, the Ministry of Defense announced the successful intercept and destruction of an inbound Iranian drone. In the UAE, Emirati air defense batteries were working overtime, engaging wave after wave of incoming Iranian ordnance. Across 6 sovereign nations simultaneously, this was Iran's doctrine in full effect. Bleed every U.S. ally in the region, stretch every Patriot battery, exhaust every interceptor magazine. What about you? Do you believe the Gulf states can absorb this punishment indefinitely? Comment below. And then came the moment that changed the calculus entirely. In Washington, D.C., President Donald Trump stepped in front of the cameras. His message was stripped of all diplomatic language. We are going to hit them extremely hard over the next 2 to 3 weeks. We're going to bring them back to the Stone Ages where they belong. Within hours of that broadcast, US and Israeli strike planners had updated their target packages. The results were immediate and devastating. A bridge connecting the cities of Karaj and Tehran, described by Iranian media as the highest bridge in the Middle East, was struck by 2 precision US munitions. The structure collapsed, 8 people were killed, 95 wounded. President Trump celebrated the destruction openly on social media. At the same time, Israeli F-35I Adeor strike packages operating with JDAM-ER glide bomb kits hit the Pasteur Institute in Tehran, a century-old medical and scientific research center that had stood since the early 1900s. Iranian officials confirmed structural damage. The international medical community reacted with outrage. The UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, speaking outside the Security Council chamber in New York, delivered a stark warning. The world was standing on the edge of a wider war. Underneath all of this, beneath the missile exchanges, the diplomatic collapse, the burning refineries, a wartime leadership crisis was detonating inside the Pentagon itself. U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth abruptly demanded the resignation of General Randy George, the United States Army's Chief of Staff, along with 2 other senior Army officers, mid-war. In the 5th week of active combat operations across the most volatile theater on Earth, The message sent to adversaries in Tehran, Moscow, and Beijing was impossible to ignore. The American military's senior command structure was being reshuffled while its forces were actively engaged in multi-domain strikes across Iran, Iraq, Syria, and Lebanon simultaneously. Iran's military spokesman did not waste a second. Within hours, the IRGC broadcast a direct warning: if Trump followed through on his threats to expand strikes against civilian power infrastructure, Iran's response would be crushing, broader, and more destructive. Not a bluff, a doctrine statement. Meanwhile, off the coast of Qatar near Doha, a commercial tanker was struck by an unidentified projectile. A British maritime security agency confirmed the hit. The Strait of Hormuz remained closed to international shipping, still blockaded by Iranian naval assets and IRGC and fast attack craft since the opening hours of the war. Global jet fuel prices had more than doubled. Airlines from New Zealand to Vietnam were cutting flight routes. The global airline industry, which had forecast record profits of $41 billion for 2026, was now hemorrhaging cash in real time. In Beirut, Israel was not waiting. An Israeli precision strike on the southern suburbs killed a senior Hezbollah commander and at least 6 additional people, according to Lebanon's Ministry of Public Health. Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz announced that homes in southern Lebanon would be demolished and hundreds of thousands of displaced Lebanese civilians would be barred from returning. In Iraq's western Anbar province, an aerial strike on a military base killed 7 fighters and wounded 13 more, the country's Ministry of Defense confirmed. This is what Day 34 and Day 35 of Operation Epic Fury looked like. 6 nations under active attack. A tanker sunk off Qatar. A century-old research institute in flames. A bridge collapsed outside Tehran. An army chief of staff fired in wartime. And Iran, its military battered, its supreme leader dead since March 1st. Its internet connectivity at 4% of normal levels, still firing. Still threatening. Still blockading the waterway that moves 20% of the world's oil. Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araki was direct. Trust in Washington stood at 0. There would be no negotiations. What former Iranian Foreign Minister Javad Zarif proposed as a peace framework, Iran abandoning nuclear development in exchange for sanctions relief, was dead on arrival in both capitals. The killing chain was still active. The target lists were still growing. The interceptor magazines across the Gulf were depleting faster than they could be resupplied. The lesson the last 48 hours have delivered to every military strategist watching this conflict is this: multi-domain saturation warfare does not require victory on any single front. Iran does not need to shoot down an F-35. It does not need to sink a carrier. It only needs to make the cost of this war, in oil prices, in airline routes, in Gulf ally stability, in American domestic political cohesion, unsustainable. And with every refinery it hits in Kuwait, every siren it triggers in Bahrain, every missile it fires at Tel Aviv, it is doing exactly that. The Stone Age threat has been made. The response is incoming. And the next 72 hours will determine whether this war expands beyond the theater anyone can still control. Stay sharp, stay informed. And ask yourself this: when the Strait of Hormuz stays closed for another 30 days, what does your world look like then?